Okay, we have one more speaker before lunch. Occasionally when you go to meetings like this, somebody says the next speaker needs no introduction, and you can't see it, but I actually have a blank box here. So that is definitely the case for Karl Birkeland. Most of you probably know or have interacted with Karl's work. He's been a fixture in the avalanche community in North America and internationally for many years, working as a ski patroller here in Colorado long time ago, and in Utah. He started the Gallatin National Avalanche Forecast Center in Montana. He worked at and was eventually the director and longtime director of the National Avalanche Center for the Forest Service. He has recently retired from a long and illustrious career, but we've sucked him back into working on a few projects, and that's what he's here to talk to us about today. So please welcome Karl Birkeland.
Thank you, Ethan, and thank you, everyone, for coming, and thanks to CSAW for having me speak. So today what I want to talk to you about are basically things I learned while writing The Starting Zone at the interface between snow and science. And this is an electronic web-based book that I've been working on with the Friends of the CAIC, and the Forest Service National Avalanche Center. And I'm going to give you a preview of the book at the end of my talk, but I don't want this to be a, hey, here's the book kind of talk. I want it to be some of the interesting stuff that I learned, or at least that sort of crystallized for me while I was doing that, because as I always have told my graduate students, you never really know something until you actually write it down. And when you're writing it down, you always figure out all these little odds and ends and pieces. Before I get started, I want to thank Ethan and Aaron Carlson, the executive director of the Friends, as well as Simon Trotman. These three folks really shared my vision, and they provided the enthusiasm, the resources, and the funding that made this project possible. The number of people that helped me with this project is really too long to list right now, but these are the primary folks who helped get the book to where it is right now. They include Doug and Erica, who actually dug through my reading at the very early phases. Nina and Eric, who you saw Eric up here earlier, and they really helped sort of refine what I had. And then the folks that really polished it off at the end were Coop, that I'm sure a lot of you know here. Ethan gave me a lot of Coop's time this summer. That was amazing. And also Zach Guy from the Crested Butte Avalanche Center. Zach was hired by the Forest Service National Avalanche Center to actually lay this out in lay it out in the platform we're using. And Zach also provided a lot of editorial content that was awesome. And between this group, we have, all of them have worked professionally with avalanches, anywhere from 6 to 36 years. 4 have worked professionally as ski patrollers, 5 have worked as mountain guides, 4 have worked as backcountry forecasters, 4 have done avalanche research, 1 has a PhD, and we also had one that recently completed their degree, a double degree in earth science and English. So we really had a great team. I really felt like we had an awesome team to help work on this with me. So what I want to talk about is some cool stuff that I learned about the Nikaia diagram. And for everyone that's taken an avalanche course, you've probably looked at this. Whoops. Backwards, yeah. You've probably looked at this diagram in any avalanche book, and it's used to explain the kind of snowflakes that we see falling out of the sky. Nikaia was a Japanese scientist who carefully documented the types of snowflakes formed under different temperatures. And here's the temperature range in degrees C and different degrees of supersaturation. So how high the humidity was in some form. And he did his work first in the field and later in the laboratory. He did decades of research to come up with this diagram. And some cloud conditions are associated with growth in the columnar direction, so right in here. Others are associated in plate-like growth. And Nikaya called snowflakes letters from the sky, because looking at a snowflake can tell you what's happening in the atmosphere above you. So sometimes we get columnar growth, and then we also get plate growth. This is a photo by Kelly Elder, who I think a lot of you know. It's a capped column. Well, how does that happen if we have either columnar or plate-like growth? And the way that happens is the snowflake will actually pass through different parts of the cloud. And in this case, first a column grew, and then plates grew on top of it. And we can have any sort of path for these crystals as they grow. And so we can have these, plate-like forms. We can have needle-like forms. And this is important because, like a dendrite, whoops, got to go back again. Dendrite will form a lower density layer within a storm snow layer, and a needle or a column will form a higher density layer. And so if we're thinking about layering in new snow, we're really interested in these different types of crystals and what kind of layering they're going to create. And, we know that layering is key for avalanches. And at a basic level, nothing over something is good. In other words, going from warm to cold, it often provides good skiing. If we have something over nothing, that tends to be bad. That would be your upside-down storm. It might start out cold and become warm. So these are sort of the general rules of thumb that we've applied to storm snow a lot. And I would suggest that most of what we put into practice with storm snow avalanches really comes from work that was done back in the 1950s by this individual, Ed LaChapelle, and probably many of his colleagues, and with this idea of these temperature changes during storms, determining whether or not our storm snow is stable or unstable. But there's some great, more recent work on storm snow avalanches by Ned Baer, who ski patrolled at Mammoth Mountain and did his PhD research on storm slabs in the early 2010s. And Ned noted just how important storm snow avalanches were at Mammoth. Almost all of the avalanches inside ski areas after that early season process where you might be digging out some of those buried depth hoar layers, almost all of it is storm snow. And at Mammoth, Ned documented that 68% of their storm snow avalanches didn't fail on the interface between the storm snow and the old snow surface. They formed, those avalanches fractured within the new snow. And when I talked to some of the folks in Montana, snow safety, I was surprised to hear that many of those folks said that they thought about 50% of their storm snow avalanches actually were fracturing within the new snow instead of at the interface between the new and the old snow. So it'd be really important to understand layering within the new snow so we can understand new snow instability. Now, Ned also found that storm snow and persistent slab avalanches have the same mechanics. So even in new snow, it's really a weak layer collapse that drives the fracture process. And he also found that sectored plates, at least for Mammoth, seem to be an especially good weak layer and capable of collapsing. The new snow layers that he saw, when he was looking at basically fairly soft new snow layers, he found that he needed a slab about a foot deep to have enough strength to be able to bend and drive that crack forward. At snow depths less than a foot, and this is with fairly soft slabs, that slab did not have enough cohesion to be able to bend and have that bending energy drive the crack forward. So those were two very interesting findings. And of course, with storm snow avalanches too, remember the difference between persistent and storm snow avalanches is that these instabilities didn't last very long. They typically lasted less than 24 hours and sometimes just hours. But one of the things that Ned did was he took these infrared pictures of the snowpack, and he was able to determine a mean effective diameter. So you can think of that akin to a crystal size. And he was able to show this blue line then represents this crystal size, and he was able to show these thin layers in the new snow. In this case, a very thin layer where the crystal size was about twice the size, just immediately above and below it, and that was the weak layer for the storms. And in this particular case, he's getting ECTs that are failing on isolation. He had a PST with only a 1 centimeter cut for an 85 centimeter ECT. So he looked at a bunch of these different storm slabs and found some really interesting results, I thought. So how are we going to forecast storm snow avalanches in the field? Well, I mean, the obvious one, right, is you take your rookie patroller and you tell them you are going to sit in the snow pit day and night, and you are going to look at every single snowflake that comes out of the sky, and you are going to tell us when they get bigger or smaller. And of course, that's not feasible. This is just a photograph that I got from Johnston and Barris from the Washington State DOT. In their particular application, they're often looking for these weaknesses within their storm snow, and they're looking for them at night because their traffic volume is low. And at that point, if they find one of these layers, if they can identify it, if they feel like they're getting enough snow on top of it, they can shut down the highway when they have low traffic volumes, release avalanches, and then clear it and open the road back up. So in some operations, that's feasible. But obviously for, say, a ski area operation or backcountry forecasting operation, that's not really feasible. There are online some really new and interesting instruments. This particular instrument, developed at the University of Utah, it takes photographs of the snow crystals as they're falling. These are different snow crystals that fell at Alta, and then it can calculate changes in density at very, very fine intervals. So this is a particular storm at Alta. It's about 30 centimeters of new snow here, and we can see densities ranging from around 20, which is 2% density, all the way up to 6.5% density. So you can see that there's these big density changes over very short distances as the cloud conditions above you change. What tools can we use to look for these storm snow instabilities today? Propagating ECTs are what Ned found to be sort of the best test that you could quickly figure out. And in terms of how many avalanches they triggered with explosives during control work, he found that a propagating ECT was the best predictor of what their activity was going to be like that day. Probably the best tool at a ski area, of course, is ski cutting. And one of the things, if you're ski cutting, it's really important to probably take a minute and see where is that snow breaking. Is it breaking at the new-old snow interface, or is there some interface within the new snow? But in large part, it's really a matter of I think in digesting some of this research, I felt like it really increased sort of my understanding of what's happening with storm snow, but also not overestimating or underestimating the instability just based on what the temperature trend was during the storm, because you could have these little changes that made a really big difference. It sort of gave me an idea that that new snow, there's a certain amount of uncertainty associated with that new snow until people actually get out on the snow and can test it. So now I just want to go through a couple other things which are different applications for the Nakaia diagram. Because typically the Nakaia diagram is presented for snow formation in the atmosphere, but this diagram actually shows how temperatures and supersaturation control the shape of growing ice crystals regardless of whether they're in the atmosphere, on the ground, or in the snowpack. So, for example, here are some crystals. These crystals came out of the snowpack for a fatal avalanche near Lost Trail Pass in Montana in March of 2024, so just last season. The forecasters investigating the avalanche circulated this photo to several folks immediately following their accident investigation, wondering what these were. And I'll give you a close-up look. Here's what those crystals look like. And any guesses? What have we got here? Are they precip particles? Are they columns that fell out of the sky? Are they facets? Are they surface hoar? Are they... Well, we can see down here 3 millimeters, so some of these things are almost a centimeter long. That'd be an awful huge column falling out of the sky, wouldn't it? And if people have looked at a lot of snow, they might have an idea of what these are, but it also might depend on the climate that you're in. And I'll give you a hint of what these are. Here's something that you might look at and be more familiar with. And at least in Montana, when we look at surface hoar, a lot of our surface hoar looks like this. So you probably wouldn't have any problem identifying these crystals, but did you know that surface hoar can also take on a columnar form? And Bruce Jameson reported this many years ago, and people who see a lot of surface hoar, especially in different climates, have likely seen these sort of needle and column forms. But I think there's still a lot of avalanche workers that aren't aware of the different forms that surface hoar can take. And some really interesting work was done at Montana State University. This is, I love these things, so bear with me here. This is a CT scan of a sample of surface hoar grown in the lab, and we're just rotating that sample around. We can see the surface hoar on the top, and we've got plate-like growth, surface hoar, right? And then in the exact same lab, but at a different temperature, here is another sample. So a little bit warmer temperature for this, and what have we got? We've got needles forming on the surface. So both of these can form very dangerous weak layers. Jameson reported that the needle-like form was less likely to form a long and persistent weak layer than the plate-like form. But it's just an example of how we can apply that Nakaia diagram to more things than just the snow falling out of the atmosphere. So here's a question I've often had in my head when I've been investigating avalanches failing on depth hoar. And the question that I have is, why do we have depth hoar avalanches that are not necessarily failing on the ground, and they're not necessarily failing on the interface between the newer snow and the depth hoar, but that they're forming within the depth hoar? And so we've got an entire room, 600 plus people, who look at a lot of depth hoar. Now, how many of you folks see avalanches that fracture actually within the depth hoar, not just at the top of the depth hoar or at the ground? Do we have anybody, or is it just me? Ethan does. Scotty does. Anyway, a lot of times if you look at these things carefully, you'll see these fractures within the depth hoar. This is a fatal avalanche accident that you had here in Colorado last year near Ophir. And you can see that the PSTs were breaking within the depth hoar on, I believe this was on an adjacent slope. And so, yeah, I asked myself this question: why is this happening? And I really never had a good solution. And could it have anything to do with this damn Nicaea diagram again? And I came across an article while working on the book where they looked at the structure of depth hoar, and they found that in this experiment, so this is an experiment where it's a laboratory experiment, and it's only a little over 12 centimeters of snow here. And they found that up here, it was stronger. You know, if we think about the colder temperatures were near the surface, and the ground was down, or this is the ground, the bottom of the sample was around zero. So oftentimes in our avalanche classes, we're taught, well, the depth hoar is going to grow fastest where the temperature is warmer. So we would think that the fastest growth rates would be right near the ground. Well, in this particular experiment, they found that this line here is the growth rate, and they found that the fastest growth rate was about 7 centimeters below the top surface of the snow. And what happened is that this particular part of the sample was in this plate-like growth. This particular part of the sample was columnar growth, and then plate-like growth again as we went through the sample. And here's 3 thin sections of these 3 samples, and you can see that the middle part has less ice, has more air, and was structurally weaker than the top and the bottom of the snowpack. So it started to provide maybe not the absolute answer, but maybe one of the reasons why we see structure in surface hoar, depth hoar rather, different structure, and that different structure is related to these different growth regimes. So what I learned while writing the book was something I already sort of known, that I hadn't fully grasped all the bits and pieces. And essentially that was that the relationships that Nicaea documented between snowflake types, temperature, and humidity apply not only for ice formation in the atmosphere, but also for ice formation on the snow surface in terms of surface hoar, and in the snowpack in terms of depth hoar, and all of this has implications for avalanches. And I just want to finish this up before I show you a little bit of the book, to remind people not to underestimate storm slabs. This is an avalanche that occurred at Alpine Meadows Ski Area in 2017. This is an avalanche that was triggered by a member of the public. If you work at a ski area, it's never a good thing when the public triggers a 3 to 4 foot deep avalanche at your ski area. And in this particular case, they had a sign up, and below they had a particular traverse, and the sign said, "Do not hike above this traverse." And below the traverse, it was skied all the way during the storm, and things were essentially stable. Above the traverse, it hadn't been skied. At 3:30 in the afternoon, a member of the public decided they wanted a few more turns. They hiked 100 yards above the sign, and they triggered this big avalanche. And the avalanche came down. The person ended up on the surface. Luckily, there was no one below them, So the avalanche didn't catch anyone or kill anyone. And then they went and they looked at the crown, and what they found was that the slab failed in a lower density storm layer that consisted of rimed plates that fell with slightly colder temperatures and light winds. So they had formed a weak layer that might not have been a persistent weak layer, but it was a fairly tricky weak layer. It wasn't easy to find, and it survived in this area where there wasn't ski compaction, and it was triggered by a skier. So I want to give you just a quick preview of this book. We're hoping to have the book available for folks in a couple of, between 2 to 4 weeks, hopefully. And the whole idea behind the book, we know that there's a lot of really good avalanche books out there, but we feel like there are a few resources that are geared specifically for avalanche professionals, such as forecasters, ski patrollers, and mountain guides. And so that was the focus behind working on this book. So bear with me as I pull it up. And I just have to remember which direction to drag it. Okay, we'll see if I can drive it from here. So it's a web-based ebook, and all right, I gotta look over here. So the cool thing, when we started this process, I said, I'm an old guy, right? So I just want a hard copy book. But I quickly warmed up to the whole electronic format. I mean, here you have a very big avalanche outside of Mount Baker ski area, and instead of just having this be the cover that says, hey, there's a big avalanche here, you actually have plenty of room to talk to the ski patrol, get their take on this avalanche, learn that it was triggered by a heli shot 52 pounds of explosives, and they're like, hey, would you like our pit that we dug on an adjacent slope after this avalanche? And I said, sure. And you can click here, and you can actually see what the profile was. So I thought that was pretty cool. And just a little brief tour around here. Boom, let's go here. So, we're talking about different kinds of near-surface faceting, radiation recrystallization. We can put in diagram. We can put in a picture. This is from research that Cora Shea did, looking at a near-infrared picture of the snow. And we can come down here, and here's Mark Staples, and he's talking about an example when they saw radiation recrystallization in the field. So we tried to sort of tier the information where, kind of the first tier is you're just looking at the pictures, the videos, the figure captions. The second tier is reading our examples about different things. And so here's an example of radiation recrystallized snow. And this is also from Ed Adams. And the cool thing here is he created this great video that shows some of this radiation recrystallization happening and how it gets weaker towards the top. And then he zeroes in on a specific, it's basically a facet chain in the middle. And then he slows it all the way down, brings that facet chain back around, and he's going to tilt the facet chain. And so you can actually, instead of just looking at a picture of facets on a crystal card, we can look at some facets that form due to radiation recrystallization, and we can actually see that tilted up and look at the cupped crystal. So I just feel like this format really just has, they sold me. I'm an old guy, but I still think, and then someone else was asking me, well, geez, can we please have a hard copy? And my comment is, well, why? But we have hundreds of articles that are all cited. If you click on this number, I'm not going to do it, it'd be a little weird from this angle, but you click on this number, it will take you right to the reference list. You can click on that reference, the reference comes up, click on a back arrow, takes you right back to the original material. So, and that's that. So, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Karl. You stay up here for a second. Well, thanks a lot, Karl. It was a great talk and looks like a great resource. Karl will be around for the rest of the day, but I'm sorry we don't have time for questions right now. But I do want to bring the American Avalanche Association back up to the stage. And bear with us for a minute, and then we'll get everybody out for lunch. So you can stay here.
Uh-oh.
The American Avalanche Association's highest award is honorary membership. It's bestowed fairly rarely, but no more than once a year, to people that have distinguished themselves by special achievement in the world of snow and avalanches. The purpose of the award is to bring honor to awardees, to provide inspiration to membership, to emphasize the programs to which the association is dedicated. The number of awards is restricted to no more than 20 living recipients at any one time. It is my pleasure to be part of the nominating committee for Karl Birkeland and for honorary membership in AAA. I'm going to read the citation. The nominators are Eric Peitsch, Scott Savage, myself, Doug Chabot, and Simon Troutman. Karl Birkeland needs no introduction, which I stated earlier, to the members of the American Avalanche Association and the avalanche industry. Karl's career as a researcher, practitioner, spans nearly half a century. He's been a ski patroller, avalanche forecaster, researcher, educator, graduate student advisor, and author of hundreds of avalanche-related publications. He began his career as a young ski patroller at Eldora Mountain in Colorado and then worked at Snow Basin in Utah. He founded and served as the first director of the Gallatin National Forest Service Avalanche Center in Bozeman, Montana. He received a Master's of Science studying snow and avalanches and spatial variability from Montana State, and then a PhD from Arizona State University. He's worked as an avalanche scientist for the National Avalanche Center and became the second director of that group. He's mentored dozens of snow science graduate students as an adjunct professor at Montana State University. He's educated thousands of recreationalists and professionals while teaching at various levels for the National Avalanche School and many other professional groups. Throughout his career, he never lost touch of what it means to have boots on the snow. He continually posed applied research questions to benefit the members of the avalanche community as well as recreationalists. Karl's astounding ability to translate complex physical processes to digestible pieces of information for a broad audience has helped untold numbers of avalanche professionals over the years. His gift to the avalanche profession is rare because he can cradle both the world of the practitioner and the scientist with ease. Karl understands the problems that field-based workers deal with, the real-world problems that people that get caught and sometimes die in avalanches face. He also has the knowledge, training, and creative mind to apply scientific methods to help all of us understand these issues better. His pioneering research in spatial variability and research in fracture mechanics undoubtedly improved our understanding of snow and avalanches. Other research topics in Karl's name include refining snow climates, identifying and classifying near-surface faceting, investigating false stable results, stability tests, characterizing slab composition, and many others. In the words of Doug Chabot, one of his results, seeing that we didn't have to go into start zones to get good information on snow stability, was a game changer for practitioners. His prolific research career results from unending curiosity about all things snow. He is constantly redefining what working in snow and avalanches means for all of us. So with that, I'd like to present Karl with honorary membership in the American Avalanche Association.
Aw.
Congrats, son.
Oh, man. You guys. Thanks, man. God. That's so nice.
You earned it, man.
Wow. I don't know what to say. I think that probably the only thing Ethan left out was that the thing that made my career interesting and fun and awesome was just all the really great people I got to work with. I feel like I owe everything to a lot of the people in this room. The nominating committee are all people I've gotten the honor of being able to work with all these years, and a lot of the other folks in the room too. My folks passed away in the last 3 years, and they used to just drag me outside all the time, whether I liked it or not when I was little. Whether it was 6 weeks in the Wind Rivers in the 1970s before anyone else knew what backpacking was, right up to getting inside that VW and having the whole family pretty much throw up on the way driving to A Basin when we were little kids. Yeah, they'd be super psyched, but big thank you to all of you, and big thanks to the nominating committee and AAA for this. I can't even tell you how much it means. Thanks a lot. Thank you, guys.